Hello and welcome to Inspiring Courage podcast. I have the lovely Bob here with me. Thank you for being my guest today, Bob.
It's a pleasure, Vafa. Lovely to see you. And I think it's first time I've been called a lovely Bob, but that's fine. Thank you very much.
You'll take that. Great. Brilliant. So we met just a few months ago, and I asked you after meeting you just once to become my story coach because I loved the way you presented in a workshop that we attended together. And you kindly agreed to work with me, and that's why I have such a beautiful story to tell for those of you who've heard it. And if you haven't heard it, then reach out. I'm happy to share that story with you. So thank you for coming to the show.
My journey's quite strange, I suppose, really, because I've had two careers. I had a career as an aerospace engineer, and for the last 20 years of my life, I spent my time designing bits for spacecraft for deep space exploration, which was a really exciting career. And I've had a wonderful speaking career and a career as a speaker coach as well. And probably the key is that I set out to achieve neither. They didn't happen by design. I didn't have some grand plan to be in either engineering or in speaking. But I think perhaps one of the lessons that's come out of my life is that life is just a journey and it just evolves. It goes along, and you should just go with it and do the things that you enjoy, because I think that's really important. When I left school, I had to find a job. Well, my father insisted I found a job, to be honest, and I didn't know what to do. And they had a thing called the Youth Employment Office, which directed me to be an apprentice draftsman. And again, I had no plans to do that, but it provided money and it gave me day release at college. So I enjoyed the life. But once I got into engineering, I found it really interested me. And I've seen this time and time again, particularly with young people. There is so much choice open to them and they're thinking, what shall I do? And I think it's very hard for them to decide at 18 or 20 what they're going to do for the rest of their life. So I think it's just good to get into something and see whether you enjoy it or not, because it's not until you do the job that you'll really understand whether that's for you. I got into engineering, and because I enjoyed it so much, I got the opportunity to go what in those days was Hatfield Polytechnic, which was a great engineering organisation. And again, I enjoyed it. I did my engineering degree and I came out and I joined the ranks of engineering. And I have to be truthful that communication is not the top skill of engineers. And I can remember sitting in the presentations for the Ministry of Defence, and there'd be consistently two people round the table. And after lunch, the people in the back row would all be asleep. And that was fairly typical of the presentations that we got in those days.
What do you call that? You call that death by PowerPoint, don't you?
Well, in those days, PowerPoint didn't exist, of course. This is long before PowerPoint.
Long before PowerPoint even.
Yeah, it was all viewfoils in those days. And
wow.
Yeah, but it was just as boring. It was the same principle, but just as boring. So I thought, well, I really ought to try and do better, but I didn't, because I detested speaking. And this is really strange for a speaker. I used to hate standing up in front of audiences and speaking. And it all sort of came to a head. I did my MBA with the Open University, and we went off to summer schools. And one of the practicals we had to do was giving a presentation on the project we'd done at the end of the week. And there were about 5 or 6 of us in the group, and we all sort of said, who's going to do the presentation? And 4 or 5 of us looked the other way. And a woman who was a sales expert said, oh, well, I do presentations every day. She said, I'll do the presentation. And she did, and she did a great job of it. And then the other 4 or 5 of us got a real rollicking off the lecturer because we'd taken no part in this presentation. And he said something that always stuck with me. And, I think it's very rare that you get one inspirational figure in your life, but you do get lots of inspiration off the people that you meet as you go through. And he said, being able to stand up and speak in front of an audience will be critical to your career. And he says, if you can't do it, you won't go very far. And that always stuck at the back of my brain. And then by a bit of happened chance, a friend of mine had double booked. He was coming to dinner with me and he'd agreed to go to a Toastmasters international meeting, which is about public speaking. So I said, why don't you come for dinner early and we'll both go to the meeting? Because I'd heard about Toastmasters on one of the many tapes I used to listen to, you know, Zig Ziglar and Brian Tracy and all those inspirational figures. In fact, I can remember Brian Tracy, who was a great speaker, also saying that he hated speaking in public.
Wow.
And that on the Monday night of the meeting, of the Toastmasters meeting, if the phone went, he prayed that it was the organizer telling him he wouldn't have to speak in that evening. So we went along and I signed up, of course, and I thought, well, this is the opportunity I've been looking for to improve my speaking. And things went really well because I got introduced to competition. And I love that. For me, it is the fastest accelerator of your speaking talents that you can ever do to compete, because you get to do the right things. You get to repeat the same speech time after time, which is what makes it really great. And then on top of that, you push yourself far harder because no one ever wants to lose, and competition brings out the best in you. So things went really well for me. And 2002, I won the UK and Ireland International Speech Championship, which sent me to America for the World Public Speaking Finals. But I didn't expect that to happen. And so when you talk about the down parts, off the back of that success was one of my down parts, because I tried to write another speech that was as good as that first winning speech, and I could never do it. And whilst I was out in America competing against people who'd been practicing their final speech for the last month, I was finishing mine on the plane on the way over there. So needless to say, I didn't do very well. I wasn't placed in the contest, which was really frustrating. And I was incredibly disappointed as to why I could have performed so well in the UK and why I didn't perform well in America. And I sort of disconnected with Toastmasters for about, well, I thought it was about 3 months. My wife says it was 6, but, and I just found that I couldn't engage with it because I couldn't understand what had gone wrong. But one of the things that happened when I was in America, like everyone else, you buy these CDs that come from the past world champions. And after about 6 months, I started to listen to these. I thought, oh, I need to get back into it. And the thing that struck me was that every one of these world champions had their own process for creating world-class speeches. And then I started to realize where it had gone wrong for me. I had no process. I'd done well, I'd practiced well, and I had a good speech, but I had no idea how I'd produced it. And therefore I had no repeatable process to go back and do it again.
That makes
So
sense. And that's what you work with people. So that's what you worked with me on, creating that structure. So you didn't change the story that I had. You just put it in a beautiful structure. I get it.
Yeah. And so from 2002, I started to work on the process of writing great speeches, because you can work on the body language, the presentation, the stage mechanics, all the things that go to make a really polished speech. But unless the underpinning structure and content is good, you're on a hiding to nothing. And even, I think it was Hitchcock said, you know, I can always make a bad film out of a good script, but I'll never make a great film out of a bad script. And that's true. If your script is poor to start with, you're on a hiding to nothing. And that was really, if you like, the second start of the journey to me. After that big disappointment, I started to understand what I had to do, not to be always the greatest, but to write consistently good speeches every time. And that became my focus. And I looked around, I looked for the skills that I needed in there, and I started to develop them, not just to go to a speech and deliver it and think, oh, that was good, but to know that I could do it time after time after time. And you're absolutely right. That's exactly what I teach, because when I get people come to me, most of them are just like you were, Vafa. They have all the right information, but as Eric Morecambe might have said, they aren't necessarily in the right order. And so that's really part of my job. And you know, at the end, people have a speech that they look at and it's got their bits in it, and they say, do you know, that was really straightforward. Why couldn't I have done that? But it's like everything, you get the skill of practicing, and
Precisely.
you get able to, I can look at a speech now and I can see which order the bit should go in for it to make sense.
Yeah, and that's what I got, that I had everything that I needed to in that, but you just put it in the right structure. And I think it comes across better because I'm connected to that story anyway. So when I tell the story, it's my story. I don't have to memorize it because I'm connected to it. I feel it. However, to put it across in the right manner, I do need to have the right structure to kind of take the audience on that journey with me. And I have actually delivered it, so thank you. I got a chance to deliver it the other day online, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, and they loved it. So it does help. And you're right, you know, we don't know what we don't know, and that's the beauty of having professionals like you that will encourage us to work with them, so that we can actually fine tune the products that we have. That's why people need coaches, because without you, I wouldn't have really fine-tuned that. So thank you very much. Your story is so beautiful. I love it. And the fact that you say you just fell into it. So you had this love for finding what your passion was. You know, I pretty much fell into my professional career because I was following the path that was carved for me almost, you know. And you are so right in saying that when we are young, we have no idea what we want to do for the rest of our lives, you know. It's a really difficult thing. And maybe you want to start on that journey, but it took me 25 years to actually realize that wasn't the path for me and I needed to change that. So I guess with putting these kind of videos out, my purpose is to get people thinking that if you are on that professional journey where you've worked really hard to get to, you've built your career up, you've invested in years of pension, and you know everybody around is telling you it's a shame, don't give it up, you've got 25 years worth of pension in that pot, and then and then, you know, at the end of the day, if that job isn't for you, if it's not leaving you fulfilled, what's the point of all the benefits that it brings? Isn't it better to actually go and find your purpose, go and find what it is that you really, really enjoy and follow it? And that's exactly what you did. And again, part of the story that you shared was you thought you'd never write a good speech again. And I don't know if you're a fan of Liz Gilbert, she says that, you know, she's the author of Eat, Pray, Love. And that book was just so popular. It's been translated to several languages, and there's a movie. And she keeps talking about how she wrote that book, and it was such a success. And she could have actually thought, oh, I'm going to stop writing now because nothing I write is ever going to be as good as that. But she didn't, because her passion is writing. And she doesn't mind if none of the following books are as good as Eat, Pray, Love. But that's what her passion is, and she's just going to go with it. So it's just having that mindset that I may not succeed as much as I have in, you know, in one area of life, but let's not give it up, because you never know what's around the corner.
No, and also it's about challenging yourself as well, because I'm not a great art expert, but my wife loves art, so she insists on taking me to. And I've always been amazed by Pablo Picasso, because, you know, Picasso could draw beautifully before he started on all this Cuban stuff with the squares and the funny faces and what have you. And when I go round the gallery, I was just amazed to see the quality of some of his paintings. And I said, why is it that a person who could draw that beautifully would then start doing things that don't seem to make sense and don't have form and shape? And she said, you know, perhaps he got to the stage in his life where he could paint beautifully, and he thought, if I don't do something different, I'll spend the rest of my life just knocking out beautiful paintings that people love. And so what he did was he just explored his talent and his art. And what you're seeing is the exploration of a man just stretching his boundaries and seeing what could happen. And now that cubist art, or whatever it comes under, the modern art, is more valuable than the stuff that he drew beautifully in the early days. You know, so who can tell? But I think it is about challenging yourself and thinking, this is not enough. You've got to go on and do more. And I'm a lifelong learner personally, and I'm learning all the time. And I go into different fields. And I think the only thing you really need in life is enthusiasm. If you've got enthusiasm, you can do anything you want.
You're right. It's that passion for learning,
Yeah.
passion for doing different things, meeting different people, and as you meet different people, you learn new things. Really, so that's I'm with you on that. It's having enough knowledge about different fields and not being afraid of saying, you know, something. Tell me more. I don't actually know much about your field, so I know very little. But tell me more, because it's only by exploring, and that's how I started learning. Because I just became an explorer. I had put myself into this box for such a long time, that I'm the healthcare professional and this is what I do, and and I knew I had transferable skills, but I didn't believe in them. So it was when I started exploring and speaking to people, sharing stories, finding out that they had failed along the way. Not every great entrepreneur that we see started off life being great and carried on. There are so many failures. And again, being from the field that I am, being afraid of talking about failures, it was refreshing to actually see people talk about failure and not be afraid of sharing their failure journeys. And that's when I started learning that there is a different kind of life out there. And it's definitely you know, rocking my boat from the perspective of learning constantly. And that's what you've touched upon. That I'm like that as well. I just love to learn, because it just keeps the brain going, doesn't it? It keeps you challenged. There's that passion to get up the next day to learn about something new and to meet somebody new. And you know, that's what I love about meeting people like you.
So the first thing now, we talked earlier about lockdown, about how it's affected us. So now when I wake up, I tend to be an early riser anyway. I spend the first hour of the day sat in bed reading books and taking notes. I map all the books that I read, so that I'm learning fresh stuff. But what's really interesting for me is that I love music, and I was inspired to take up the saxophone by my son. He played a saxophone when he was young. And so I love music, and music is the same as speaking. You never learn it. You only learn where you are, but you can go on and on and on and learn different things. But then I read some information on writing books, because I thought that might help me with the speech writing. But then I look at the structure of music and the way that great composers take you through emotional cycles in music. And suddenly you find that all these things are interconnected. They're all using the same approach to connecting with human emotions that you use in writing, that you use in music, that you use in speaking. And suddenly you think, well, hang on, I thought these were all separate subjects that I'd have to learn. But in fact, there's a huge overlap in what they're doing.
Very interesting.
Yeah. And it just makes the universe sort of endless, really. You can connect loads of things. It just grows and grows.
And the more you learn, the more you see the connection.
Yeah, and the more you realize you have to learn as well.
And the more you learn, the more you know how much you don't know, right?
Exactly right.
Which is the scary thing.
It isn't. It's the exciting thing, because that just opens more opportunities for you.
Yeah, exactly. I'm so grateful that you came and spoke with me. I could speak to you all day, but I'd happily bring you back so that we can talk about different subjects. Thank you so much, and thank you for being a part of my life in the last year and directing me. So I really appreciate it.
That's lovely, and I hope it carries on as well, because I very much enjoyed working with you.
No doubt, I'm sure it will.
Okay.
Take care, and I'll catch up with you soon. Cheers.
Bye now.
Bye bye.